we are really proud to welcome tonight Dudley Rutherford, Pastor Dudley Rutherford of Shepherd of the Hills Church out in California, and he has had such a fantastic ministry there. Dudley is a Wichita, Kansas young man. He grew up here. His father pastored here in the city. He has other brothers who are pastors. And Dudley, it's great to have you tonight. I know that your congregation out there, 10,000 member Shepherd of the Hills Church, really keeps you busy. We're honored that tonight you've taken the time to be with us. Welcome to Answering the Call.
Well, Papa Joe, right. It is good to be with you. We are longtime friends.
That's
as you said,
sure.
I grew up in Wichita and very familiar with Terry Fox and his preaching and his church and his willingness to take a stand. And so thankful for you guys and Pat, just the stand you're making here on this radio program.
Well, we appreciate you more than we can say. And Dudley, you left the Midwest back in '87 and moved out to California. You're there in the Los Angeles area, just north of Los Angeles in Porter Ranch, California. I've been there to visit your church. As a matter of fact, I was there just recently as a guest for your 25th anniversary. The people there love you, and why wouldn't they? I mean, God has used you in a marvelous way. The church started with 350 people. I remember coming out to hold a revival for you. The church grew there at Hillcrest to 1,000 people, and now you've got a church that's over 10,000 members strong. You have numerous congregations, even daughter churches and other locations where you all meet, satellite campuses. It is unbelievable what's happening, and it's just continuing to pop, isn't it?
Well, it is, and I hope the pastors that are listening tonight, I really believe that part of it is that we're in a very difficult culture out here in California. It is evil in nature, so many different ways. But when the church truly takes a stand, it stands for righteousness and holiness, and truly preaches the Word of God. There is still a remnant, as bad as California is morally. There is a remnant of people who want to take that stand, but they're desperately looking for a church, and we. Just about every sermon I preach, someone gets out and walks out. They're offended and they're upset, but there's 10 more who are joining because that's the kind of church they want to attend, a church that preaches the Word.
Boy, Dudley, that really resonates with all of us. I mean, we've been in churches where we've seen people walk out through the years over the abortion issue or over the homosexual agenda or over pornography or alcohol by the drink or gambling. I mean, Terry, people are always saying quit meddling in our business, and the church really is in the business, should be, of being the conscience of the community.
Well, Dudley, what's so neat about your model is you have chosen not to compromise, and you paid a price for it, but God has anointed your ministry in California, and I hope that the pastors listening, and we want to share more about how God has used you, your book. Professor Pat Bullock is here, and Pat has shared your book with our pastors. Dudley, you don't have to compromise the preaching of the Word of God to build a great church, do you?
No, I think, Terry, as you know, we're living in the final days.
Amen.
And I know you guys are fighting the devil there in Kansas, but brother, the devil lives in California.
Dudley, I probably wouldn't argue with you that much. Every time I come out to California, I am just shocked. I kind of stand in awe. The mayor of Los Angeles has called Shepherd of the Hills Church the most racially diverse church in Los Angeles. When you had me out to preach for you one time, and I repeat one time, when you had me out there to preach for you, there were 5 different services. Well, they haven't recovered yet. He says,
no problem.
There were 5 services at that time. I remember it, guys. There were 3 services on Sunday morning, and that had been, the night before I had warmed up in 2 Saturday night services. So 5 times I'm preaching. I mean, I found myself saying, haven't I already said that, a number of times? And I've never seen a more racially diverse congregation in my life. I mean, it was just amazing. The church is technicolor there, and I mean, that just thrills me because I know that's what the Lord's church is. And so it's a great representation of that. I know you had UCLA legend John Wooden in your congregation. You've had Chuck Norris of television fame in the congregation. You've had so many people there in the Los Angeles area. I even remember meeting that girls group of singers. In Vogue, was that the name of the group? They were all members there. He's had just so many different people there that he's had an opportunity to minister to and have an influence on. And I am just so proud. I know you call me Papa Joe. I know I kind of puff up like a proud papa when I talk about you, Dudley. I really am thrilled at the way God is using you. I was in an airport not long ago reading your book. God has an app for that, and I was sitting there in the shop reading it in this restaurant, and these two women across from me said, "What a neat book." And I mean, isn't that a great title? God has an app for that. Pat, speak to that.
Let me say what's so wonderful about the book that I really appreciated. It is so you take the Bible and apply it to life, and you encounter life where people live, and they understand exactly what the Scripture is saying about each particular app that you presented in the book.
Yeah, the book actually goes to the book of James, which is kind of a play on words. It's the most applicable book in the Bible. And the purpose of the book, I really wrote it for people who don't go to church very often, and just hoping that after reading the book, they would realize that God really does have the answers to all our...
You know, folks, we're excited about this coming Sunday. This coming Sunday is a very special time in America. June the 9th is Pulpit Freedom Sunday, and that we're encouraging pastors, and pastors are being encouraged and really have picked up the gauntlet, so to speak, to preach on God's design for marriage on Sunday, June the 9th, Pulpit Freedom Sunday. And we're hoping preachers all over the United States are going to deal with that subject, God's design for marriage. And as you know, we see a lot of definitions today of marriage, and certainly out in California they're dealing with that. We're thrilled to have Pastor Dudley Rutherford with us tonight, a pastor of Shepherd of the Hills Church. He's a senior pastor there, a church of 10,000 plus members with a number of different satellite congregations and satellite sites in California. And California is certainly a battleground. Dudley, we know about Proposition 8. We know about the will of the people being overturned by a judge. And can you tell us a little bit about what's going on there concerning, maybe is that a good place to start with Proposition 8?
Yeah, I think so. What people need to know was that this happened back in 2008. Which was the first time that President Obama, current president, was elected. And we, the churches out here, got organized. I think you have to have something like 800,000 signatures to get something on the ballot. And we went out and we picked up 1.3 million signatures to get it on the ballot.
Amazing.
It was the largest gathering of signatures for any proposition in the history of the state of California. And so it goes on to the ballot, and so when it came time to vote in November 2008, there were more people, Joe, this is very interesting, there were more people who voted on Proposition 8 than voted on who was going to be president of the United States of America. Usually people vote on the president, and then they may or may not even vote on the propositions because they don't understand them.
You know, that is a vital point. I mean, repeat that again, Dudley.
Okay, so usually people vote on the president, and they may or may not vote on the proposition. In California, 2008, there were more people that voted on Proposition 8, either for or against. The combined vote was higher than the people who voted on the proposition. The reason for that is quite simple. People understood that defining marriage was actually more important than who was going to be running the country for the next 4 years.
Isn't that amazing? And you know, Dudley, that tells you a whole lot, too, about California. I mean, we talk about California, a lot of people talk about it in bad terms, and many times we have negative things to say about California, and it is a different place, and without a doubt, you all are in battles there usually before we are, but there are a lot of Christian, conservative people in the state of California.
We have them, and we finally got organized for that because we knew the importance of it. And so when they go to the polls, just so you know the numbers, there were 7 million people. That's a lot of people. there were 7 million people who voted to define marriage as a union between a man and a woman.
7 million people.
And it narrowly passed, okay? There was like 6.5 million who voted against it.
Boy.
But it passed, 7 million people strong. Now, don't forget, we first had to garner 1.5 or
Right.
1.3 million
To
signatures.
even make it a referendum, right?
Yes, and so we got that, and then we had 7 million people who voted for it. And then there was one judge from San Francisco who happened to be gay, who ruled that it was unconstitutional, and he threw out, one guy threw out 7 million votes.
Unbelievable.
And said you don't count. Now, Joe, here's something that you need to know and your listeners need to know. This thing has been appealed to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
And the Supreme Court of the United States is supposed to rule on this in the next 10 days.
Amen.
And so in the next 10 days, as they rule, it is going to be life-changing as far as marriage and the church is concerned, either way they rule.
Yes.
And so your listeners need to be in great prayer for
Amen.
these men, because behind the scenes, the wheels are turning for them to rule against Prop 8 instead of
Certainly.
support it. So I just want you to know, Joe, in the next 10 days, you're going to have a lot to talk about on your radio program.
You know, Dudley, I don't think it's just by accident that you happen to be our guest tonight either. We certainly want to call everyone, Pat and Terry, listening to our voices tonight,
Yes, call to prayer.
everyone to prayer about this. I mean,
Yeah.
we need for God to really do some amazing things.
Dudley, what is your prophecy? What do you think the Supreme Court will do?
Oh, brother, I don't know. I saw the one gay judge take away 7 million votes.
Boy.
And, you know, I just pray to God that these guys do the right thing. Because what people don't understand is that when gay marriage becomes legal in this country, they are going to lose their personal freedoms, their religious
Amen.
freedoms,
Amen.
and their parental freedoms.
Yeah, it's more than a one-issue vote, right, Dudley?
Yeah. You know, it's like it happens all the time. I think recently there was a florist, a woman who runs a florist. She's a florist, and there was a gay couple that came and said, "We want you to do the flowers for our wedding," and she simply said, "No, I don't want to. I prefer not to perform or to provide flowers. You can go find someone else, but I personally choose not to be involved." And they've turned around and sued her for showing discrimination.
Boy.
And once it becomes the law of the land, that's going to happen in almost every realm. And one day we'll come to the church. And I've told people
Amen.
there's
Amen.
going to come a gay couple who walks down the aisle of my church and demand that I marry them.
Yes.
Yep.
And at that point, I've got to make a decision. Am I going to marry them?
Or start
go-
a prison
go-
ministry.
Or go to jail.
Or go to jail? And
Well, Dudley,
I think that day's coming.
Dudley, I don't know how old you are, but can you imagine that we are just now determining what marriage is? It absolutely blows my mind that we even have to vote on this kind of stuff. And one of the things I want to ask you, you said you organized. Tell me how you, as a church leader and as a pastor, how did you organize the people in California to take this kind of stand? What process did you use?
Well, I've got to tell you, the credit really goes to a couple of guys. One primarily was Jim Garlow down in San Diego. He took over John Maxwell's church when John Maxwell resigned at, I want to say, Skyline Wesleyan Church.
I think that's right.
And Jim got together with a guy named Chris Clark, and they began to organize. And I got to be honest with you, there were literally thousands and thousands of churches and pastors who refused to participate.
Mm-hmm.
And it was by the grace of God. You know, obviously I'm deeply burdened for this issue, and so knowing that you're going to offend people, knowing that people are going to walk out of your church service, I had no choice but to get involved, because when you start to redefine marriage, an institution that's been around for 5,000 years at least, where God defined marriage as a union between a man and a woman, and all the ramifications, when you change that, it is like the final straw for the destruction of your country, of your nation.
Amen.
Yeah.
I had no choice but to get involved, and we probably had, 1,000 churches and we tried to get people in Southern California. We tried to have a group from San Diego and a group from Northern California, and we all just did our part. And, you know, again, we rallied the troops.
In other words, you picked up the phone, called people, you had meetings, that type of thing?
We had meetings, we had phone calls, we had registration drives, we had, obviously from the pulpit, we preached on it. And it was difficult for me because I preach at a very multi-ethnic church, and I have a very high percentage of African Americans who primarily voted for President Obama.
Right.
In mass, they voted for President Obama.
Right.
Which I totally understand, except President Obama is so pro-abortion and
Right.
so pro-gay marriage. I had a hard time justifying it. And so I knew when I stood on those two issues that I was really going to be dividing even the church that
We're honored to have Pastor Dudley Rutherford from Shepherd of the Hills Church. He's the senior pastor there in Porter Ranch, California. Dudley has a heart to see all people reach a place where they fully surrender their lives to Jesus Christ and then use their transformed life to bring utmost glory to God. He and his wife Renee are the proud parents of 3 children. Dudley is a man's man. I'll tell you, if you ever get to meet him, you'll not forget him. We're honored to have him tonight. The book that he has out is called God Has an App for That. God has an app for that, and we highly recommend the book. You know, a lot of people today, when we talk about this homosexual agenda, when we talk about defining marriage as only between a man and a woman, when we talk about even amending, like we did, our state constitution
Right.
to define marriage, there are a lot of people who say, what's the big deal? What difference does it make? You know, why have you all decided to just live or die on this issue? Well, as Dudley has very well put it, it just covers so many other areas of life, but this is something I don't think people ever thought could happen in America. Here's the headline: California okays bill allowing boys in girls' restrooms. You heard me correctly. Sacramento, California, a bill that would allow boys who say they identify as girls to use the girls' restrooms and locker rooms and vice versa. That passed the California Assembly Thursday, May the 9th, and now heads to the state Senate. Has anything been done on that now, Dudley? Anything with the Senate?
Joe, listen to me, my friend.
Don't tell me this. Don't tell me this.
Let me tell you what's going on out here in California. There, in the state assembly as well as the state senate, the Democrats hold a supermajority, which they need, I believe, a 2/3 majority vote on any particular issue.
Oh boy.
And the Republicans, who tend to stand for family values as far as biblical marriage and standing against abortion, they are in the minority of the supermajority, which means the state Democrats, the House and the Senate, control everything. We can't stop anything. They can change any rule that they want to change. They can block anything they want to block. They can make a stand for homosexuality anytime they want, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it.
Dudley.
Now, what's happened is that in those legislation bodies, there are many gay people involved in those bodies. And this particular bill, AB 1266, was written by a man named Tom Amiano, who's a 70-year-old gay activist out of San Francisco. And this is what I tell people about marriage. It's really not about them wanting to be married.
Right.
In the
Right.
state of California,
That's
and I hope people are listening, in the state of California, gays have had civil rights. Joe, I hope you're sitting down, and Terry and Pat. They have had civil rights in California since the 1980s. They've had civil rights.
Since the 80s.
Since the 1980s, they've had civil rights. And it's not about the right to be married. It is an agenda that they have to make homosexuality to be the norm.
That's
That's
right.
right.
And
That's
part
right.
of that process is to indoctrinate our schools.
That's right.
And there's another bill, and I don't want to miss AB 1266. There was another bill that passed in July of 2011. I'm sure you talked about it. It was called SB 48, and the Governor Jerry Brown signed it into law.
Yes.
That states that every public school in the state of California, ages K through 12, have to spend an entire month promoting the role and contribution of the LGBT
No.
community. And so this bill about anyone can use any bathroom,
That's the lesbian and gay community you're talking about. Their
Transgender.
agenda, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and not only are we a liberal state where anything goes, but the Senate and the House, the people that control this state, there's a very active homosexual lobby that is well funded and well organized, and they just keep, because they have the supermajority, they just keep throwing this stuff down down our throats. And I'm telling you, that's why in the state of Kansas and every other state, we have got to somehow find Christian people to run in the Democrat and the Republican parties.
Yes, yes.
And we've got to somehow figure out how to get that changed, because if not, we are going down the tubes.
That's exactly right. You know, folks, when you talk about the gambling issue in Kansas, all of you know how many years we fought gambling, and the gambling industry just kept throwing money after money after money, advertisement after advertisement. They never run out, and every time they're defeated, you can bet they're going to be back the next year just as strong. Well, we're seeing the same thing with the homosexual agenda. I draw that parallel because that's what Dudley is saying. They've got plenty of money, they're funded, they have people who support them, and they never give up, because the final agenda they have is endorsement for their lifestyle as being just as good as anyone else's.
And not only that, they spend all of the time. There's no relenting at all
Never.
of their attacks upon us. Dudley, I'm 74,
Okay?
and how old are you now?
We know the truth
I
now.
think
We
I'm
know-
55.
We know what Joe said.
55.
We weren't sure, Joe. He said you were 65, but we knew better.
If he's
Let's
55,
not get
I'm
personal
50.
here, buddy.
Okay, I want to ask you, can you believe, is it possible that we're discussing this very subject when you and I were in school? I didn't know what a transgender was. In
No,
fact,
I went to school, and I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, and I remember it wasn't even in high school. It was when I got out of high school. I graduated in 1976 from Wichita Southeast, and the very next year I was a freshman at Bible college when everyone started coming out of the closet. And I remember thinking, what in the world have we come to? What is this coming? I didn't even know what coming out of the closet meant.
Really?
And from that time till today, we have, as a nation, we have gone over the deep end. Where, and I keep telling, and I have a chance to talk to certain senators, and I try to confront them on certain things. It's not just that we're allowing sin, and I understand that we have freedoms to sin. Anybody can commit any sin. I get that. I understand that. But the difference is we're not just allowing sin. We're actually
Endorsing it.
promoting.
That's
we're
right.
promoting sin.
That's right.
And we're doing exactly what the Bible said, where we're calling evil good and we're calling good evil.
That's
And
right.
I'm like you. I am speechless at how we got this bad so quickly.
It's really been a redefining of the word. Really, if a person was asked to be a person who would accept things and not be totally closed-minded, we were talking about people really receiving something that was different. Tolerance. We always talked about tolerance, but now tolerance is being redefined. You're not tolerant anymore unless you endorse something as being just as good.
Josh McDowell said many years ago, the most dangerous word in America was tolerance, and you know what? Unfortunately, he was right.
Right. I want to encourage people. I don't know how much time we have left here, but in the book of John, in John chapter 10, one of the most powerful discourses that Jesus ever gave I mean, it is touching. It moves your heart. It's the discourse on the Good Shepherd and how the shepherd knows the sheep and the sheep
Amen.
recognize his voice.
Amen.
It is one of the most moving, touching, most beautiful messages that Jesus ever gave. And if you read that story in John chapter 10, after he gets done talking about that, the very next verse, John chapter 10, verse 20, it says that those who were listening called Jesus demon-possessed
Right.
and raving mad, are
Right.
the two things they call him.
Amen.
And I'm just thinking, if they call Jesus demon-possessed and raving mad after giving the discourse on the Good Shepherd, then the world, when you guys, the three of you and me and other Christians who are listening and pastors, when they stand for righteousness and they take this stand for biblical marriage and they take the stand to protect the life of the unborn child, and the world turns against us, we need to remember that they called Jesus demon-possessed and raving
Amen.
mad,
Amen. That's
and
good.
just be willing to accept that threat. Be willing to accept people walking out of your church.
Amen.
Exactly.
Amen.
They'll come back when they
Amen.
need truth.
Amen.
When their false gods don't answer their problems, they'll be back.
Amen.
Because the truth never comes back void.